Melbourne fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and it was a frustrating game at a soulless stadium, but we'll bank the 4 points and move on to the next one. Joining me tonight to dissect our very vanilla win at the Docklands is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our faithful listeners out there. Also, another great week in football and for the Melbourne Football Club. 6 wins now from 9 games, including winning at the godforsaken hole called Docklands. The match report review officer finally looked upon us favourably, so we've got Gozzy playing for us in the coming game. And to top it all off, Carlton, Collingwood, Aston and Richmond all lost this week. What a great week to follow footy.
Well, it would have been even nice if Geelong had won, but then Collingwood would have won, so I don't know, maybe a draw. Joining us tonight, bringing us all those stats that we love to hear about is Bidman. Good evening, Bidman.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Not all of the stats that we love. You'll have to tune in on Friday for all of the stats that we love. I've decided to give up any pretense of trying to limit how long things go for on Friday. And so I just really lent into the analysis of the review of the Sydney game. Such a fascinating game. This week it'll be probably less on the review. It'll be something like 2080 this week. But look, without, being stereotypically accused of being a Bidman response, I actually think it wasn't a vanilla game. And even though I'm not a huge fan of Docklands, I really enjoyed going there because I come from the West, and so it's like a half an hour train ride door to door. I was there, I left home, and by public transport, less than an hour later, I'm sitting in my seat on the level 1 because I didn't open the top. But in terms of a vanilla game, I think a big part of it, for me, it depends really what your expectations were beforehand. And I wrote this on the game day thread, and I'll on Demonland, and I'll quickly say that I never ever go into the game day thread once the game starts. It's like I did early days on Demonland and swore off it pretty early, but in the game day thread beforehand, I noted that one of my 2 best bets of the rounds were the Roos to make their line. For precisely the same reason that I thought how this game would pan out, because last week's game was extraordinarily taxing aerobically. Both teams ran over 300 kilometres. Never happens, hardly ever happens. I've been looking at the tracker. I can't recall the last time I've seen a Melbourne team run over 300 kilometres in a game. It was really predictable that they would struggle, and they did.
You're referring to Sydney, Sydney.
Yeah. So in that game, why I thought it was a good bet, the line in that game was, I think, 6 goals, and they ended up winning, only kicking a goal in the last, running out of puff, and hanging on for 8 days. For an 8-point win. And I noted that in this game, if I was going to have a bet, if someone was going to force me to have a bet in the Melbourne game, I don't bet on Melbourne games, as I've said before, it would have all day, every day, I would have backed West Coast Eagles to Melbourne to win by under 42 points. All day, every day. As I noted on Demonland, I'd be well pleased if we got anywhere near 42 points, because it was such a taxing game last week. There's just no possible way that either team, either Melbourne or Sydney, were going to be anywhere near optimal shape. It's like, I'll talk about it a bit later, but it's, I think fans need to get their head around the way footy's being played. You ask the team to run over 600 kilometres in that game between both teams. They are going to struggle the next week. So there's no, I'd say that by way of, that was my thinking going into it. I was happy. I was going in thinking, for me, I'll be well pleased if we win by 3-4 goals and get the 4 points and come out of it with no injuries. So from that perspective, I was thrilled. And the other thing is that I'll unpack this a little bit in the stats file. I thought it was a great coaching performance from King. There was a lot to like in that game. And so, I was really, really happy with the result and happy with how we played. I mean, it wasn't as exciting, obviously, and there were, but I'll make a case that was partly by how we engineered that game.
Yeah, I will say I said the word vanilla, and that was sort of my initial takeaway when I left the game, obviously I wanted to win by a lot. I wanted a percentage boost, because percentage is going to be very important for us later in the year. But on reflection, I sort of I could see that we did do a few things differently, and I think the coach is very smart, and you'll probably unpack it, and I've got a few things to say based on one of the questions we've got coming up. But I think we did have a view also, one of the taxing game we just came from, but we've got couple of really tough games coming up in Hawthorn Bulldogs, and then even if you want to go ahead and look at Giants in Alice Springs, and then King's Birthday, they're our next 4 games. So yeah, that's sort of their 4 games that we want to sort of win at least 2, if not more, out of those.
That's absolutely right. And as I've said before, one of the things I really, really, really loving about King is his press conferences and what information he shares. He's so honest. You don't have to do the ridiculous subtext. You don't have to work out what he's trying to say. He just says it. And he essentially said exactly what you just said. He didn't talk about the Bulldogs or those future games. Yeah. He said, we've got a 6-day break into the Hawks game. And it was in the context of a question about Cozzy. And he, maybe he was struggling a bit physically or whatever. And he's explicitly said, I played him up forward, gave Chandler the opportunity to play more midfield with a view to the fact that we've got a 6-day break into the Hawks game. Clearly, it wasn't even like needing to be a subtext reader, is that's our focus. And as I've talked about for several years, and it's so now the case, is the high performance program. Just no one talks about it in footy. It's unbelievable. It is. I would argue it's more significant than almost any other position other than the senior coach in terms of its influence on the game. And the way footy's being played at the moment, running nearly 300 kilometres, you can't be up every week. It's just physically not possible. And, and that's why no one's talking about Sydney. No one's saying, well, they only won by 8 points. That line, as I said, was the bookies and the punters had that line at 6 goals. And they fell in they stopped to a walk in the last quarter. I think it was quite an impressive performance for us to back up. I was worried about this game from that perspective. So, he's great, King. I really, really like the way he talks about the game, and, he's really open.
We touched on
Did either of you think that the AFL could turn the lights on at Docklands for the game? It was like watching a Twilight game going on.
Oh, it's a shocker.
Well, you really...
The only time you could see the lights was when they had them flashing after a goal when they were playing songs. Actually, you could see more of the ground, but it was just shocking. It was, put the lights on so we can watch the football being played, for crying out loud.
Well, you think it was too dark in the stadium, even with the lights that they've got lighting up the field.
Yeah. They only had half of them on.
I've always thought it's dim in there. The lighting is dim in there, but. I sat down on the bottom level, and I haven't sat on the bottom level like that. I sat in the bottom level against the Lions, but not near the fence. I was only 5 or 6 rows back from the fence, and it was quite kind of good because you could hear the players talking on the field.
Yeah, you can hear that even though I was one level up. You can hear all that. That's what I like about Marvel. I mean, as much as we joke a solar stadium, I think you actually. The seats that I have, you feel like you're right in the game. I love it from that perspective, but I always find it disconcerting, particularly when you go for a 1 o'clock game and it's so dark inside, and you come outside and it's like you're coming out of a nightclub at 6 a.m. in the morning after an all-nighter. You feel like death warmed up after a game. Anyway, let's get into our housekeeping stuff before we get into the meat and potatoes of the podcast each week. We do invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate that feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we do give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share their reviews about us. D Faithful 87 writes, I've listened to other D's podcasts over the years and they eventually start sounding the same, but this one feels authentic. It captures the emotional rollercoaster of following Melbourne better than most footy fan media without becoming overly dramatic after every win or loss. Never listen to me go on a rant. What I like is that it sounds like real supporters talking footy the way fans actually do during the week. There's analysis, stats, excuse me, guys, frustration, optimism, disagreement, and humour, but it never feels manufactured or like people are performing for clicks. The discussion usually covers the exact things I've been thinking about after games. The Demonland community involvement is also a big plus. You can tell that the podcast is connected to a genuine supporter base rather than just reading reactions off social media for content. It's become the only D's podcast I'll consistently listen to from start to finish each week. Thank you for that lovely feedback, D Faithful 87. It's very much valued and appreciated, and I'm just going to put the cough button on for a second because it's killing me. All right, back. Keep that feedback coming in 2026. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we will give you a shout out on the show. Don't forget to look out for Bin Man's Stats Files podcast, which drops on Fridays. It's a companion podcast to this show in the Demonland podcast universe, with Bin Man breaking down all the stats each and every week. It's a long-form deep dive into the numbers behind the game, the ones that help tell the story of a brilliant win or a vanilla win, or a disappointing loss. Bin Man will review the past match and preview the upcoming game, and you can find Bin Man's Stats Files in the Demonland podcast feed, so look out for it on Friday. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. And if you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, jump into our weekly podcast post or send us a DM. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. And you can listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. Just search for Demonland Podcast and subscribe. And to connect with fellow D supporters from across Australia and around the world, head over to demonland.com. Sign up. It's completely free and you can join in the conversation. And if you want to call the show live, give us a call on 0486 387 929. That's 0486 387 929. If you're listening live on your phone via demonland.com, just hit the call button. It should automatically call you from your phone app. During the week, you can give that number a call, leave a message, and we'll play it out on the podcast. During the week, those calls go straight through to voicemail. You won't have to speak to a person. And I don't know what happened last week, but I turned on the phone. I had it on the entire time of for the show. And just today, I received a message from before the show last week, from 10 a.m. before the show last week, and it was from Roadstar. So I'm just going to play the nice things that he says at the beginning of the message and the end. I'm not going to play the couple of minutes in between because it was all about the Sydney game. He did mention a topic that we actually talked about. That was the kickouts that Colton was doing up the field in the Sydney game. So I really wish we could have, I would have got this and we would have played it, but I'm going to play it now to give Roadstar his due.
Hey, Demonlanders, it's Roadstar here. Thanks again for all the hard work you guys put into this wonderful podcast, and I really appreciate the standalone stats file podcast, Bin Man. Looking good. Or sounding good. I actually don't mind that it goes for a bit longer too. Makes my commute, gives me something to do. But apart from that, go D's, and keep up the great work, guys. Really appreciate it.
Sorry about that, Roadstar. Don't know what happened. The message came today when I turned on the phone. Didn't come in last week, even though I'd have the date and time from 10 a.m. last Monday. Our chat room is back. So if you're listening live and want to contribute in real time, click on the chat button on the podcast player and it will link you to the chat. You've got to be signed into Demonland and logged in to chat. So drop a question or a comment and we'll do our best to monitor it during the show. I'm just going to bring it up now. So if you do want to chat, get on the chat thing. You can listen to this podcast live every week at demonland.com on Monday nights at 8 p.m. So before we get into the stats files, we had the return of your nemesis, Bin Man, this week. The Pearl has returned. Well, I don't know if it is, George. It's never been proven. Anyway, the Pearl writes, the podcast has gone to the next level with the stats and data spin-off pod. Bin Man has grown from an incisive footy data analyst to a social media influencer. Even the AFL are going to supply the umpires with stats before they give Brownlow votes. Does this increase or decrease Gawn's chances of getting votes? Will the umpires use the player ratings? Or should they just give the Brownlow to Dacos now? So, Bin Man, do you have any response for the nemesis, the Pearl, or are you too famous now to respond to your critics?
Look, I've always got time for my critics. I'm not on any social media, so I must be the most powerful social media influencer out there, seeing I'm not on any social media at all, unless you count. Do you count Demonland as social media?
It is a form of early social media for boomers.
Like early social media.
We're very social.
Yeah. Well, if you count Demonland as a social media, well, then I'm not sure how influential I am on Demonland. But in terms of, it's actually an interesting comment about the Brownlow because it's such a bloody nonsense. Of course, they should have access to the stats. Now, people go, oh, well, that will mean Nick Dacos will win the Brownlow because the umpires will have be able to look at the stats. Right? Hello, what's different? Like why? Like midfielders have been winning the Brownlow for the last 30 years, 40 years. When's the last time a ruckman won it? Like 1977 when what was the player in the Velour suit?
1991, famous Demon won it.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go. So 30-odd years since Brownlow.
And Scott Wind around the same time.
Yep. All right, so when was the last time a non-midfielder
in the 90s.
Yeah, okay, 90s. So for over 30 years, only midfielders winning it. And so people are worried about the umpires seeing the stats because what? Because midfielders are going to win it? Right. So, in fact,
I think people are just...
if you looked at the data, you would have a better spread of players who would have the opportunity. Now, one of the things that people criticise about the player ratings is that it does to an extent, it makes it more difficult. It's harder for defenders to get points. And so people point to the player ratings as, it's all about midfielders and forwards, and they're the players who get the ratings, and it doesn't actually truly reflect the performance. Okay, well then who would you ask to truly reflect performance? You'd ask the coaches. Not a single defender in 20 years has finished in the top 10 of the coaches awards. Who wins the coaches awards every year? Midfielders. So Pearl, I hope that they give umpires the data, and I hope that they give them the coaches have real-time data and access to the ratings. All of the champion data stuff, by the way, comes from the clubs, not the fans. It's not a fan-based service. It's all designed for the football clubs. They are the key stakeholder. The key source of revenue for champion data is the AFL football clubs who want that information. And the umpires bloody well should have access to it instead of the feely, that guy's got blonde hair and he never chats back to me. Maybe someone like Clary Oliver might have won a Brownlow medal 4 or 5 years ago in his pomp. In 21, he might have won the Brownlow medal when he was by far the best midfielder in the AFL. Why didn't he win it? Because he talks back to the umpire, but he dominated football, yet he didn't win the Brownlow. He was by far the best midfielder in the 21 season. I would argue the best player, didn't win a Brownlow.
He wasn't the fairest.
Well, he didn't get reported. What do you mean he wasn't the fairest? He didn't get reported.
Well, the Brownlow's for the fairest and best.
Yeah.
He was the best.
Why is he unfair? Why is he unfair?
It's not unfair. It's about the nicest person.
Well, it's not the best and nicest. He never got reported. He has actually got a really good record. He's barely been reported at all, Clary.
I don't trust the umpires to be able to see anything, let alone interpret statistics as well. So.
So then that's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? You don't think they can interpret anything, but let's let them choose the Brownlow medal winner without access to any information.
Well, that's probably going to give us a better result.
Well, hardly. So, Robbie Flower never won a bloody Brownlow, did he?
I think a lot of people are a bit salty about this whole stats thing because they really don't want Nick Dacos to win it. Not because of Nick Dacos, just because he's Collingwood player.
But they won't. But if you did it now, look, the top 4 players, he's not in the top 4 players.
Well, I've just looked at the coaches' votes.
If you awarded votes on the ratings, you would get much closer to who was actually performing. 100%, 1,000%. If the umpires just went from the champion data player ratings, they would get much closer to who was the best player on the ground. Because he at the moment is 4th rated player in the AFL. Maxi's rated 3. Now, rucks don't win Brownlows. But if they went by the player ratings, he would have the 3rd most Brownlow votes in the AFL right now. Heaney's 2nd, and who's first? I forget first. So Dacos is not even in I think he's 9th or something in the AFL for player ratings, something like that.
But the player ratings have been, they're not just raw stats. I'm assuming they're stuff that's sort of been taken out. They're not just raw stats on their own, like just seeing kicks and there's a bit of, I don't know how they generate it, whether there's some algorithm that puts it all together.
It's calculated by
there's
every
a calculation, yes.
The simplest way to think of it is next expected score. Every single intervention a player has in the game, a smother, a tackle, a kick.
So the umpires don't have access to that. They've got access to the raw rating. They've got access to the raw stats.
Out of -6 to +6, how it impacts the next score, your team's ability to score, or if you turn it over, let's say if you turn it over in the goal square to the opponent, that would be -6 points. If Maxi took it out of the ruck from a centre bounce, no other player provided a shepherd, no other player did anything. He just took it out of the ruck, ran forward and kicked a goal. He would get 6 player rating points. That's why I like it, because it measures scoreboard impact, not feels, not how you like, whether he that's why so often the eye test is wrong. So, combine the two is where you can come up with some decent perspective. As Daniel Hoyne often says, I'm not suggesting of the Pearl, is, what does he say? Someone who doesn't have used data in their analysis is a flog with an opinion. So,
I'm all for Bin Man's proposal. Under that, we don't need umpires to do any of that. We'll just go for the player ratings at the end of the season, and that'll be it.
Well, that'd be
take the umpires out of it. Positive.
Fine by me. But we can't have our cake and eat it too, can we? We can't just say the umpires are bloody hopeless at it and then not give them any tools to get better.
There are 3 ruckmen in the top 15 of the coaches' votes.
In the top 15?
Yeah. The rest of midfielders.
At the end of the season, going back 20 years, a defender hasn't been in the top 10 of the coaches' votes in the last 20 years.
I'm just looking if there's any defenders in there. It's not really the one. Callum Wilkie is in there. That's the only one. And I guess some are halfback. Anyway, all right, let's move on. Get into your stats files, otherwise we're going to be here all night.
Okay, no worries. So I found this game a really fascinating game tactically, and King was asked in the presser that the direct question, I forget the exact word, but paraphrasing, he was asked, the Eagles didn't allow you to play the way you wanted to play. Now, he, and by that he meant, the questioner that she was referring to some of their tactics, which included after quarter time, they played an extra in defence. And, when way footy's been played at the moment, teams put an extra behind the ball for one reason and one reason only, and that's to limit the opponent's ability to score quickly, to limit the damage. So average teams put a player behind an extra in defence. The whole game, they looked to clog up the corridor and take the corridor away from us, and we didn't go through the corridor at all in the first half, not once, 0 times in the first half. They also brought up an extra after a quarter time, and this might have been not the whole game, also brought an extra, sometimes 2 extras to the stoppages to mitigate our strength in the stoppages. And that was, as I said in the Stats File preview podcast, their only statistical area they came even anywhere close to Melbourne is stoppages, winning stoppages and scores from stoppages. They obviously were trying to both limit our impact but lean into that, relative advantage they had, or at least being equal with that. And so they did that. And the question was, those strategies together forced you to play how you didn't want to play. Now, King just let that go through to the keeper. And he did so because I don't think that's entirely the case. I think, of course, to an extent, we played how they wanted to because, for example, if you have an extra in defence, means you've got to avoid kicking to that extra. And so kicking it to the outnumber. So you might move it laterally, for example, around the arc more until you get a free player because there's more players inside. But I'd argue that we played the game like that because we chose to. I suspect King came into the game with a really clear plan to be high disposal. We're a low disposal side, and in this game we're a really high disposal side. And we're a low uncontested mark side. In this game, we had more uncontested marks than them. So in this game, I don't normally look at the disposal stats, but we had 221 kicks to 198. I think that's probably the first time this season we've had more kicks than our opposition. We had 378 disposals to 365, but those numbers were even more further apart in the first half. I think we came into the game with a clear plan to be high disposals, kick it laterally more often because we were cooked, as I said, from last week. And I think the priority is being in optimal shape for the Hawks game, which we play, as King noted in the presser, off a 6-day break. It's also worth noting the Hawks are coming off a 9-day break. I thought that during the game, one of the funny things about going to Marvel is that they put stats, speaking of stats, they put the stats constantly up on those big television screens. So they were rolling them around and I was watching the game, but to be honest, the numbers were reinforcing my thought. But early in the first quarter, I thought we're clearly playing a different way. We're clearly not attacking. There were a number of times in that first quarter we had the opportunity to go fast towards our goal in the way how we normally play, but instead we kicked laterally when the ball was deep in our fence, and reinforcing that idea that it was a pre-game strategy to minimise the impact. I was sitting, as I said, in the right forward pocket on level 1, maybe 5 or 6 rows back from the fence, and heaps of occasions right through the match, but particularly it was notable in that first half actually. Multiple players were signalling to the bloke who had the ball, the kicker, to go laterally, not up the ground. So to me, it was clearly a strategy going into the game. And that was reinforced for me, at least, when I heard Steele interviewed after the game on ABC. He was asked about how he felt physically. And he said that he felt quite fresh, actually, and not as banged up, quote unquote, not as banged up as he usually is after a game because there were so few stoppages in the game. And that was the reason there were so few stoppages is because how we played. All of those lateral kicks keeps the ball out of contest. And so in the first half, for instance, we completely controlled possession, which is just not how we play. So 48% of the time we had the footy in the first. Normally it's much closer. The Eagles only had the ball 36% of the time. It's in contest for the rest of the time. We had 130, I mentioned the uncontested possessions. We had 136 uncontested possessions. West Coast just had 97 at halftime. We had 68 uncontested marks at halftime, the second most in the first half since 2021, which speaks to me to a strategy, a clear strategy which we implemented, which is really what I wanted to highlight. That's good work by King. And it's one of the things I've been talking about on the Stats File podcast that I've really come to appreciate about his coaching is that he hasn't got the one style fit all and force other teams to respond to that. Every week it looks a little bit differently. And so that was a really big factor in the game. So the other thing I thought about the numbers is it's a really hard game to really go into any detail or put any meaning behind a lot of the numbers. One, because that's how we were playing. And two, it's a funny dynamic when you're in a game where you should win, you're going in, you're thinking about next week, you're playing a team on bottom of the ladder who's 18th in the AFL for defence, 17th for offence. You want to get your 4 points, you want to bank them. When you get a 6-goal lead early like we did, then really all bets are off statistically after that because the game, we got what we got, which was that game where it looked like we were just trying to hold them at arm's length, partly by the way we were using the ball. They, like the last quarter, they just dominated all of the statistical areas because we were running out on fumes at that stage. But the pressure rating, was actually quite interesting, much higher, much higher than I thought it would be. So the overall pressure rating for the match was 187. For us, they were 175. So we were actually plus 12 for pressure, which I was really surprised at. But my point really, our quarter by quarter was 189 to 180 in the first quarter, plus 9. We were plus 36 for pressure in the second quarter. That is super impressive given, as I said, I feel like we were conserving energy by kicking it laterally and high disposal and high possession and uncontested marks. 201. We've only had 3 quarters this season where we've had a rating of over 200 and a quarter. That's one of them, 201. Third quarter, 181, plus 14. The last quarter, when clearly the fatigue was kicking in and we were really not quite putting the cue in the rack, but gagging for the line was, so we dominated pressure-wise up to that. It was 176 to their 192 in the last. So they really kept going, the Eagles, in terms of their intensity. So minus 16 for that last quarter. But the big, if you wanted to pick one number that jumped out, and McQualter mentioned this a couple of times in his presser, was turnover. We kicked 70 of our points were from turnover, so 99 points we scored in this match, 70 of which were turnover. We're averaging 54.2 this season. We're given up 49.7, and they could only manage 37. As evidence of their effectiveness with the strategy of bringing extra to a stoppage, we only scored 11 points in this match from stoppages outside the centre bounce. Unfortunately for them, they could only score 13. So we actually defended stoppage pretty well, but they defended our stoppage. We're averaging 28.1 points this season from scores from stoppages outside the centre bounce, and only managed 11 again in this quarter against one of the worst defensive sides, or in fact the worst defensive side in the AFL. So yeah, a really interesting game. I thought tactically from King, the numbers, they're skewed by that strategy. They're skewed by the fatigue that we were, evidently, obviously it looked like we were fatigue side, and also planning forward to next week. But yeah, 70 points from turnover was the big kicker for them. And they're averaging 68 points, I think, from turnover, so only a tick above their season average of being scored against. But yeah, interesting game tactically, clever game, I thought, from King. Standout player, I didn't do the player ratings, I've got him here, but the standout player for me was Chandler, who I saw, interestingly, got the 10 coaches votes. I'm pretty sure that's the first time he's got 10 coaches votes in his career. I'd be surprised if that wasn't the case.
That's a wrap on Stats Files.
Bang! 10 minutes, Andy. Look at that discipline.
I was wasn't prepared for that, big man. Yeah. I was just eating my dinner while you were going there. I thought I'd have time for another few pieces of pizza. I'm not eating
10
pizza.
Minutes, bang. Well, discipline. It's all about discipline, Andy.
You'll get the long form version of that, and a look at, I'm sure you've got an in-depth look at the Hawks game. We'll touch on a bit of that later on our preview. All right.
2080.
Sorry?
2080, 20% on the review of that game, 80% on the preview of the Hawks game.
I'll hold you to that. I'm gonna time it to the second. All right, well, let's get into our listener questions. And Pingu writes, this is a bit of a long one, but I like it. Were the panel concerned by the way that we played today? I found it a really frustrating watch because it felt like we were simultaneously in control and yet never quite able to break the game open. There were periods where we looked dominant, and it genuinely felt like we were one clean patch of football away from blowing the Eagles apart by 10 goals or more. But to their credit, they never let the game be played on our terms for long enough. What made it frustrating was that West Coast didn't really seem interested in taking the game on or turning it into an open contest. Their priority appeared to be denying us rhythm. They stayed accountable, clogged space, applied pressure, and basically dragged the game into a grind. Even when we had momentum, they found ways to slow things down and keep themselves within touching distance. It almost felt less like they were trying to win the game outright and more like they were trying to prevent us from playing the brand of football that we wanted to play. Against better sides, oddly enough, we often look more dangerous because those teams back their own system. They take the game on and create a more open contest. That suits us because our ball movement, overlap run, and ability to transition can really hurt quality opposition. I also wonder whether being underdogs in a lot of those bigger games has actually worked in our favour. Some of those top sides may have underestimated us slightly or backed their own strengths rather than focusing heavily on shutting us down. West Coast, on the other hand, had completely committed to making it ugly and limiting our strength, and for long stretches they succeeded. Maybe I'm reading it incorrectly and the panel sees it differently, but that was the strange feeling I came away with. Not that we were outplayed, but that we were dragged into a style of game that stopped us from ever fully taking control despite looking the better side for most of the day. Yeah, that's good. And I'll admit, I initially came away from the game, as I mentioned, feeling a little frustrated that with both of the way we played and the way that the match unfolded. At no stage did I genuinely feel like that we were going to lose, but it never quite became the comfortable percentage boosting win that it felt like football that I was sort of hoping for, I guess. And it wasn't until, as I mentioned earlier, that when I reflected afterwards and listened to Kingy's presser, because as Big Man said, he said some very good things in there, and you can, I believe everything he says. He's not trying to just have coach speak that we've heard for a long time, and it put the performance into a bit more context for me, I think, when I think a bit more about it. And at the end of the day, we banked the 4 points, which ultimately, at the end of the day, is the most important thing in the context of the season as a whole. And it's important to note that we have fielded, again, an incredibly young side. We've got 11 players with under 50 games experience. We're missing at least 8 of our best 23 players. That can't be underestimated. Another thing that I found interesting with the way that we played this week, and B-Man, you've touched on it already, is that it was deliberate that we weren't playing our usual chaos, the run and gun game style. We seemed far more patient and I guess less concerned with trying to slice the game open up at every opportunity, and more focused on maintaining, control and territory. There were moments that where in previous weeks we might have taken the riskier option through the corridor, tried to, surge the ball forward, whereas yesterday, the approach seemed a bit more calculated, and I don't know whether that was just opposition driven or something more intentional from the coaching staff, which I'm leaning more with our coaching staff that I'm leaning more to. And it did feel like we're a side that's trying to build a game style that will perhaps hold up better against the stronger teams that we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I can definitely understand why supporters walked away unsatisfied, because on paper it's probably a game where we should or would expect to win by 10 goals and bank that extra percentage that's surely going to be needed later on. And it's very possible that it was a deliberate decision not to completely empty the tank for the coming weeks. We've got a massive couple of weeks coming up, as I mentioned, Hawks, Bulldogs. We go to the Alice to play the Giants, and then, of course, King's birthday. So, George, were you disappointed at all with the way that we played and how the eventual result? Was it deliberate on our part? Did the Eagles drag us down to their level?
I think it was a bit of everything in a sense. I'll bring up Andy's MFCSS here. I haven't mentioned that. No. I remember we all remember the bad old days prior to the arrival of Paul Roos, and the first thing that he implemented was stopping the rot, stopping the bleeding. And unfortunately for West Coast, they're in the position. They have lost their last 5 games by an average of 11 goals. So if you've got a relatively young team playing and they're losing on average by 11 goals, and after the first quarter you're already 5 goals down, you do everything absolutely possible to stop another complete blowout. And I think there was a very certain element of that fitted into what we wanted as well. The Eagles were trying to hold possession as much as possible, because they'd already found out in the first quarter, if you give it to Melbourne, they're going to blow you off the park, which was right on the horizon. The other thing was, of course, we're off a 6-day break. It was a very pressing game that we played. We had a lot of tired players, particularly young players, that Windsor, Langford, Latrell, all looked down, even Max and Cozzy. I think it was less about the tagging, but the fact that he just looked tired in this game. So it suited our needs. It certainly suited theirs, because they didn't want to get blown away again. But I think Pinju's right in one sense. West Coast stopped trying to win the game. They were just all about trying to limit the damage. And like I said, as Melbourne supporters, we know that's what you've got to do for a start with a team like this that's sitting down the bottom, getting blown off the park every week. They'll just stop trying at all before the season ends, and the coach doesn't want to see that, neither do the supporters.
They didn't go totally. I actually thought they were not too bad in that last. I was blown out by the fact that, as I said, as I've noted that on the Stats File podcast, on the Demonland Stats File 26 thread, one of the things that Wheelo's doing now is putting up the quarter by quarter numbers, and they make for a really interesting reading when you get a result like this. So the last quarter, everything flipped on its head, like the bananas amount of uncontested possession. They won more, like raw numbers. They won more clearances than us. They won more stoppages than us. And funnily enough, they moved it from their back half better than us, but they couldn't score. We scored 44 of our points from the defensive half. They could only score 24. It just shows, though, George, doesn't it, how critical it is to scoreboard pressure. And that's what I mean about sometimes the stats in this game, they're sort of increasingly after that first quarter aren't really representative of anything, because we got that 6-goal lead. We held it. They did their best to come back at us. But if we hadn't have been as accurate as we were in that first quarter, that game was on, I reckon, because we were always going to struggle to get to the line. And I mentioned that Sydney game, it was so similar. It was just so similar, is they got out to a 15, 20-point margin in that third quarter and then really stopped to a bit of a heap. If we only won that game on expected score by 8 and a bit points. So, it was the first time this season that our opponent had scored, their actual score was lower than the expected score. And so we're bloody lucky it was, because if we'd missed a few early and they'd got on, given the fact that I think we were running out of gas, it could have been problematical. But we put scoreboard pressure on and we held them at arm's length is how it felt like. But you're right, George, in terms of, I'd be bloody tearing my hair out if I was a West Coast fan, they lost it really on their turnovers. Some of their turnovers were just appalling, and we really hurt them. We did a great job of punishing them from that, and I thought it was a really professional win from us. It's the sort of win that you hope, professional 6-goal win that we'd hope to have seen when we played Essendon. But you're right about West Coast. They're in a world of struggle town, and even their very best player, Reid, I'm amazed he got coaches' votes, and I wonder if King gave it to him, but he didn't impress me in a great deal. He's good. I mean, he's strong. Who did he run through? He ran through. Someone tried to tackle him and he went over him like a bloody tank. But he for me, for a number one AFL player who everyone was talking about, generational talent, he didn't stamp his self on the game the way he might have, I thought. And the other interesting statistical thing was at half time, I noticed on the big Marvel scoreboard, their ruckman hadn't had a single hit out, and I don't think got a single hit out for one of them, not their second ruck, whoever that was. They did pretty well to win stoppages with one of their backup rucks not getting any tap outs.
Yeah. I think they've got a pretty good midfielder there. I know don't rate him, but I think he the one that got all those clearances? Was he getting most of the clearances for them?
Oh, Yo got a fair few.
I forgot about Yo. Yeah, but Yo also played as that loose man in defence as well. All right, let's get into the next one. Pates asks, how much should be put on our sluggish performance at times down to potential loading from the high performance team? Now, big man, we haven't heard about loading much from you this season, although you do talk about the importance of the high performance team. But did you think we looked sluggish? Maybe we're talking about, obviously coming off, the tough game in Sydney. We got the break coming up, not the 6-day break coming up, and then a couple of tough games. So what do you think about that and our loading schedule?
We look sluggish. 1,000%. That's my point. That's why I thought we went into the game to mitigate that. Mitigate it by controlling it, by doing something we have not done all season, and play an uncontested kick mark game. That's not how we play. That's not our strategy. We clearly came into the game with that strategy. Occam's razor would suggest we did that to mitigate the impact of not just last week's game, which was incredibly taxing. Like, you will not get a more physically, aerobically taxing game of footy than that game last week against Sydney. It was 25 degrees. As I said, we ran 304 Ks. They ran 305 Ks. Melbourne had 4 players who ran over 15 kilometres. And I'll bet you my bottom dollar that's never happened in the history of the Melbourne Footy Club. And on top of that, it was physically tough. I mentioned last week, the Swans are the best pressure team in the AFL. They apply more pressure than any other team. They're number one for the contest, and they smashed us. So we were sluggish. Loading, I doubt it, but it raises actually a really interesting point. Before that point thing is that it wasn't just last week. The previous week, we played the Tigers coming off a 5-day break. Played the Lions coming off a 5-day break, or if I got that muddled up. So we had 3 massive weeks. The Lions, we had to travel from South Australia. Then we beat the Lions. Then 5 days into the Tigers game, and then we had a decent break into the Sydney game, during which they may have done a little bit of extra work because you get so few breaks. They can only do the additional loading in when they've got more than a week or something. So maybe they did a little bit more in that game. And then into this game. So this was a 6-day break too, wasn't it? So it was, when did we play?
We played on Sunday, didn't we?
Yeah, 6 game.
Yeah, so this is a 6-day break into this game. So 7-day break. Yeah. 7-day break into this game. 6-day break into the Hawthorn. So it's not just the Sydney game, it's the 3 weeks preceding it and the fact that we've got a 6-day break into the Hawthorn. So no doubt, I don't know, I mean, Pates might have been sort of doing the wind-up on the loading bit. So we might have done some extra work, may well have done some extra work in the 9-day break into the Sydney game. That's possible because when else can you do it? It's really worth noting that, AFL footy, I just don't get it. People will... they're still looking at each game in isolation. It's, each game is like in a hermetically sealed bubble, completely unconnected to what's happened in the previous weeks and completely unconnected in the games that are coming up, for instance, next week. Just for, like I mentioned this before, the Swans are a much more seasoned side than us. Our average games is 89 in that game against the Swans. Theirs is 125. Only 2 of their best 23 out, as we talked about last week. We've got 6 or 7 or 8, depending on who you count, in our best 23 out, a big chunk of whom are senior players. And so it's no surprise we would flag. They flagged. They just ran completely out of pot. They only kicked a goal in the last quarter. They're the highest scoring team in the AFL by some margin, could only manage 1 goal in the Docklands, in perfect conditions. So, we absolutely did. It raises, we're absolutely sluggish. There's no question about that. And they were clearly prioritising the Hawks game. And as I've said, I think that's what they've done now in footy. You cannot be up every week. So they've got to strategically plan which game can they risk being not as up as other weeks. I suspect that they clearly targeted this game as one of those games so that they're in optimal shape or as close as they can be next week. That is their priority. It's a big risk. You take a big risk, you can get rolled by the team at the bottom of the ladder. We got through that risk. But it raises an interesting point about loading. Again, I've talked about it, and it really, really is just ridiculous that our bye is not to round 16. It is just ridiculous. It's so unfair on the Melbourne Football Club, particularly because so many of our best 23 are kids. So Langford, Lindsay, Colt,
Trelly.
Trelly. They're kids. They're first, second year players, your young players who are absolutely needing that mid-season break. And ours is into July. It is just so ridiculous. And I'll bet you my bottom dollar, when the AFL were doing the fixture and working that out, their assumption was Melbourne would be nowhere near the 10. So it doesn't matter. But we are such a disadvantage for any other team in the top 6 or fighting for that top 6 position, because all of them, some of them will have had 2 byes by then. Most of them, the ones playing in the opening round will have had 2 byes by then. It is just ridiculous. And, the only silver lining on that is that it gives us a chance to load and be with a plan to be sort of tapering off into the finals. That's the only silver lining of that. But players like Langford, he is a big fella. He's probably, 85, 95 kilos. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's in, he needs a break at some point. We're going to struggle to get to round 16. I think that AFL, the fixture is just ridiculously unfair on the Ds.
Smurf asks, do you agree with King's claim that Cozzy is basically untaggable? Because today it looked like West Coast managed to significantly blunt his influence. They put a huge amount of work into taking him out of the game, and for the most part, it was effective. Going forward, clubs are clearly going to invest more time and attention into getting Cozzy off the chessboard because of how damaging he can be. Question is, what can we do structurally or tactically to counter that? So, big man, is Cozzy untaggable? He didn't have much influence in this game, certainly. I have missed something, but I'll get back to that. Missed your question for you, George. Sorry. So big man, he was certainly nowhere near the level that he's been the past month. He had 14 possessions, 2 clearances, 272 metres gained in this game. He did kick the goal. He'll be a person of interest for other clubs in order to curb his influence. How do we break the tag? If that's what
I agree with King. He is almost untaggable. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to stop him? And, I mean, they obviously put time into him, but King's answer to that question, because he was literally almost asked exactly that same question. King said basically what I just said. We're coming off a huge block of games. We had a 5-day break into the Richmond game. We've got a 6-day break into the next game. He all but said our focus is next week. Cos is knackered, is essentially the subtext of what he said. I'd also note that it seems to have got little again, King, I just love him. King is the one who raised this, is that he was really worried. Cos was worried that he had let the side down with that ridiculous report that he ended up getting a report for the...
Well, he didn't get reported.
He got reported. He didn't get suspended.
He didn't get
he went to the MRO.
Well, they look at it.
So they could have even just not even done that. So he didn't get reported. He went
had to go to the MRO. Any sort of contact.
He was worried about that, and so much so that, and I assumed when I first heard it, he called him after, but then I realised he must have meant that he called him during the game. But he said that he called Cos and spoke to him on the phone and said, "Chill, don't worry, I watched it. You're okay." But it would have potentially worried him during the game. He also said that he played Cos up forward for a big chunk of time, which enabled Chandler to, his answer was that gave us the opportunity to give Chandler some time in the midfield that we otherwise weren't. So untaggable.
Well, that was to break the tag. They played him forward to break the tag.
No. Well, that's not what the coach said. The coach said it was to give Chandler a chop out. You keep him. You don't break the tag by sending a player down forward. He said that King said he's untaggable.
Cozzy was sent down forward because I thought at one stage he actually had done a hamstring. He contested in the middle and hit the ground.
He did look. He looked real,
and then they sent him down. Then they sent him down to the forward line all on his own. He was obviously wasn't a hamstring. He was absolutely utterly buggered. Yeah, it's as simple as that. So you put him down there. You've got to put someone else in the middle. Exactly. Of course, Chandler's the natural option, but Cozzy was completely shot. And it wasn't the tag that was winning. It was the fact that he was just so tired in this game. He set such high standards. It wasn't surprising. So, but he's still untaggable. You won't be able to stop him when he's on his let loose.
What can you do? You can only hold him, and he's just the play way he plays. But just on that, I agree. He looked buggered, and you can see him fairly close up. But someone on Demonland posted that he'd heard, funny, I forget the connection, that Disco was quite crook, and he was pulled out on the morning, and that I forget the poster's name, apologies if you're listening, but he said he was told that number of players at Melbourne Footy Club were suffering from the same illness that Disco took him out of the game. I wouldn't be shocked if Cos was one of them, because he looked buggered and didn't have his normal zip. But it's hardly surprising given how well he played last week and how well he played against. He's coming off 2 unbelievable performances, Richmond and the Sydney Swans. So I think you've nailed it. Georgie was buggered.
Our very own Binman has a question for George. Binman, do you want to ask George the question? It's written there in the notes. If you don't have them, I'll read it in your voice, but you may as well do it.
You can read it in my voice, Anne.
I won't even attempt to do that. Can you see it? Have you got it there?
Okay, yeah, George. Do you still think Cross is an AFL level and doesn't bring anything that we need?
we'll find out by the end of the season whether he's at AFL level. He's been very useful so far, certainly. I was critical of his selection because it wasn't what we needed. He's a small forward come part-time mid, and that's all he's ever played at Casey. We have a desperate need for at least small backs and certainly more defenders in the side. And the SPP was an opportunity to at least have a look at players who are in those roles. We bypassed 3 other defenders in that same period. The problem we've got, we lost May, we lost McVie. We've got Xavier Taylor as a replacement back. Hopefully he comes through. But we're probably going to lose T-Mac come the end of this season. We've got Lever and Salem all on the wrong side of 30. And to be honest, we really haven't had a lockdown small defender since Michael Hibberd and even Neville Jetta in the past. So it'll be interesting when we come up against Hawthorn this week with a couple of really flighty small forwards, who's going to be able to handle them.
Yeah, so look, I guess my perspective is what I said when we had that discussion a couple of weeks ago, is exactly what we need, George, and it's to do
No, this is for the future, not the now. This is for the future.
No, for the now. And that's why he's selected. That's why I was so shocked when you said it, because, well, I mean, everyone's saying, including us, we all rate King as a coach. We bring him in from the VFL list. As soon as May gets exited, we bring Paddy Cross in. He plays 1 game at the VFL level and Stephen King selects him. He gets injured, plays 2 games at VFL coming back from injury, and he's straight back in. That's because he is best 23 and is exactly what we need, because our whole game plan does not work. It's all based on running play, and King has said that. He's said that right from the beginning. He values players who can play in multiple positions. He said that this morning on SEN. He really, really has a big emphasis on players who can play midfield, can play halfback, can play wing. Cross played wing in this game. He was our winger for almost the entire game. Langford on one wing, Cross on the other wing. He plays tall, brings the ball to ground, as I mentioned on the stats file. The first 2 goals we scored last week against the Sydney Swans were because Cross brought the ball to ground. He's an elite runner who plays tall and is exactly what we need, because no one need apply for a game in the Melbourne Football Club ones who cannot run to the degree Cross can. And so that's really was my point in, he's exactly what we need, and that's why he's in the team. It's why he's not going anywhere soon. He can play wing like he did in the game just gone. He can play forward like he did in his first game and part of the Sydney Swans game. He can go back like he did against Sydney Swans when they had to shuffle because Myercheck. He's not going out of I'm not, of course I agree we need to lock down the defender and all of those things. I don't disagree with that. But Cross, we need the way King has got the game plan needs 6 or 7 or 8 players like Cross who can run close to 6-minute, 2 kilometre time trials, who can physically do the work, are disciplined enough to do the role that they're asked, and can run all day at a good clip. So the high half forward role is what it used to be called, and Nibbler was the exemplar of it. Now every team in the AFL who are playing the way we're playing, like the Sydney Swans and the Hawks, with such incredible demand on the amount of running that's done, you need 6, 7, 8 of those players. And without it, we're going nowhere. We've got no chance. So at the moment, we've got Cross, Langdon, CJ, which is why he's not going out of the side anytime soon. We've got probably our best runner in Sharp and, of course, Langdon. And you need 5, 6, 7, 8 of those players. Otherwise, you're not winning, getting close to being a contender in AFL footy the way it's being played. And it's clearly why they targeted Cross, and it's clearly why he's in the side, in why King has selected him in his best 23.
Has a nice pair of hands, that mark that he took stretching his arms out.
The reason I came to he was unbelievable in that first quarter, Cross. He was our best player in that first quarter. He dropped away a bit. I think his rating was something like 10, 5 of which was in that first quarter. He kicked 3 goals, laid 6 tackles. He ran his guts out. He was our best runner with the ball, which is, again, if you look at the Telstra tracker, he was our best runner in our quickest runner, our best runner when we had the ball in terms of the distant run in attack. He's really an important player to the way we play footy. And I think the reason I'd raise it is because I think if people don't sort of jerry to that, like it's so fundamental to King's game plan, that running. For it to work, you need runners. It is partly why it's so beneficial to have got rid of Clary and Track and Steve May.
Coach obviously rates
I think that's why, we'll get to it a bit later, that's why I think Rivers is very unlikely. I reckon there's a chance Rivers won't get back in this side because he's not a quick enough runner. And I don't think he's got a big enough tank.
Coach obviously rates Cross. He came in out of nowhere, got injured. As soon as he was back in the team.
Of course. I mean, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
That tells you he's an important piece of the puzzle. And so he won't be going out of the side anytime soon is my tip.
3 goals. As I always say, low possession. If you're low possession, I think he had 10 and you kicked 3.
Yeah. He had more, but 3 times as many possessions as Jeffo.
I'll tell you. Yeah, well, that's could be a problem too. Master Chief writes, I thought that Chin Chandler was excellent today and he's burst through the middle. They appeared to use him in order to break the hard tag that the Eagles employed on Cuzzy. You guys don't agree with that. In a short period, Chin was involved directly in 3 consecutive goals in a short period of time, including one of his own. I thought he was fantastic and has taken his game to another level so far this season. Is Chin in a contract? He's coming out of contract at the end of this year. They always have a great year when they're coming out of contract.
Sparrow.
George, Chin has taken his game to another level this year, and he's been a lot more consistent.
I totally agree. I mean, was it probably 3 or 4 years ago? He was being heavily touted from Port Adelaide to go back home. But when it comes to Chin, I'm reminded of a Demonland event we had a number of years ago with Brendan McCartney, who was an assistant coach at Melbourne for quite a period of time and actually predicted that we'd win a premiership before 2021. He did that. He said, we will win in the next couple of years a premiership. Nobody but quite believed him at that stage, but that's certainly what happened. But the whole point is he, in that meeting, he made the point about James Harms and his inability to get on the field at that stage. And basically, Brendan said it takes 3, 4, 5 years for a player to be able to build up the body necessary to be able to play AFL football. And I think this is what we're seeing with Chin now, who's 26 years of age. He's reached that point where his body can sustain without injury the full length of an AFL season, and because of the disappearance of Oliver and Petrarca, he's been given more and more roles in the midfield, and he's really adapted to it well. The same thing applies to Sparrow, unsurprisingly, who also is 25 years of age, given the opportunities, and they're starting to provide the output that we've always suspected and hoped for. Just as interestingly, people like Howes and Turner down the back line are doing the same thing. Guess what? They're hitting 23, 24 years of age. They've been in the system 4 to 5 years and are suddenly producing the output as well. So that's a bonus. These are the sort of players. I think Chin as well. I'm guessing that he's recently had a kid. He was cradling a kid in the change rooms thereafter. So a bit more maturity in his life now that he's a dad and wanting to stick around. But he's been fantastic. He's absolutely hard at the ball, and it's certainly in this game he was spectacular. With his attack on ball and man as well. So, it's great to see him having taken that step up this year. He was given the opportunity and he's taken it.
He's a real good user of the ball as well. In his passing, that goal was fantastic that he kicked.
Yeah, beautiful left foot.
Yeah,
beautiful left foot. And George, I think that is such an important point about he's now 25, 26. He's seasoned AFL player. He's gone to that next level physically, and I think it's so important when we think of players like Colt. And I think I don't know about you guys, but it seems like as time's gone past, the footy world has got quicker and quicker at writing players off. Maybe it's a phenomenon of social media. Maybe I should influence
absolutely.
Because, it always used to be the rule in footy is you give them to 24, 25 before you make a definitive judgment about where they're at. And, of course, you can have some guesses, but it's exactly right. Like Chin, 3 years ago, he was one of the Demonland whipping boys. It's like Nibbler. Early doors, his was a whipping boy. So when, like Colt last year, people were down. I remember, I said at the beginning of this year, it's a tough, this is a big year for him, Colt. You've got to give these players the opportunity. They may not take it, though. Of course, some players don't, but I think you're spot on there. And it's exactly true also of Sparrow. Like he's, taken that time. But what I love about both of them, I think, George, it's a great combination, two players to put together is their leadership. They've both stood up, and I've heard Chin talk about it, and I've heard Sparrow talk about it over the last 3 years, is that one of their goals is to be better leaders and leaders of the footy club. And you have to argue Chin is his player rating points in this were crazy. So 20 player rating points is considered elite. He had 21.3. He was the highest rated player on the ground. Harley Reid was second with 18.3. Speaking of Sparrow, he was third. What was crazy about Kate Chandler's points is you mentioned his ball use. Of those 21.3 rating points, he got 13.3 of them from how he used the ball. And the other thing that was amazing about his numbers is he got 13.1 of his points in the third quarter. So he had an amazing third quarter, Chandler, but he had 7 score involvements. He kicked a goal in the end. He got 360 metres game, which is not massive, I guess, but 8 contested possessions. So he wins his own footy, 6 post clearance contested possessions. And importantly, he's a handball receive player. He's one of our players who they give fantastic performance from him. But that goal was just amazing, wasn't it? Wasn't that a beautiful goal where he picked it up, span, and went for goal? And the kick that where he kicked it to, where he sort of laterally went across.
Maybe
Sharp,
cross.
wasn't it? Was it Sharp where he kicked down into the pocket? That was right in front of me. And I'd like to think that Sharp heard me yell play on because he immediately did and slotted that goal.
Lefty says, welcome back, Bowser. 26 disposals at 85% efficiency. This is what we've been screaming out for coming off half-back. He's so composed with ball in hand and he never wastes a disposal. Just love our premiership lucky charm. It's a big man. It was very nice to have back in the side such a great user of the ball, rebounding it off the halfback, wasn't it?
It's great to have him back. He's like one of the impressive things about this season is it really shouldn't be undersold. Like I've talked about it every year, but injuries is by far the biggest determinant of success. We've got a minimum 6 of our best 23 out. They were up until last week. Some would say 7 or 8. Let's say 6 for the sake of argument. To the fact we're 6-3 stage of the season is so. It really is amazing, and more people in the media should be pumping that aspect of our performance up. I'll reference Sydney again. They've only got 2 of the best 23 not playing. So we're doing really well considering the calibre of players we've not got playing, and Bowser is, more critical than some in some respect because we've also lost Salem. We've had a dearth of those halfback flankers, so much so that Colts had to go back there and looks like he's nailed down. But you think just logically a player with his foot skills and ability to hit targets and make good decisions from the halfback flank would just be critical to this game plan, wouldn't it? Just the way it's set up. And it just looked like that. He looked like he hadn't missed a beat, partly because George noted in his performances at Casey, he was playing at a high intensity right in how he was performing. But I love how he takes time. I love the way he steps back. He makes great decisions. He's just, as Lefty notes, 26 disposals at 85% efficiency. But on top of that, he also makes really good decisions. And that's what you want from a halfback flanker. Good kicks who make good decisions. And set up high quality scoring opportunities. As I said, we got 70 points on turnover. A big chunk of them were from Bowser making the Eagles pay from out of the back half. Love it. And, I think Lefty's exactly right. He's just so composed with ball in hand. He never wastes it. No. And he's also a leader. I like his intensity, the way he plays, and that back line with May going out. We need leaders down there. Speaking of which, leaders down there, Lever looks in great nick. I reckon physically he looks in good nick, and he's really rising to the occasion. I reckon Lever this year.
That he is. I was a bit taken aback. I didn't recognise him with that haircut that he had, shaving those years off. Red and Bluebeard writes, thanks for the podcast, guys. Great stuff. I do like Max Heath as a ruckman, but it seems we're robbing Peter to pay Paul in how Max Gawn is used. Gawn as the deepest forward might be okay for some centre throw-ups, but it seems a bit of a waste otherwise, particularly in the third quarter today when he was largely out of the play. Would we be better to have him roaming a kick behind the play when Moose is rucking? And that mark of Max's at the end, how can that be ball up? Surely it's either a mark or play on. And yeah, that mark, non-mark, I guess, was an absolute disgrace if you have a look at the footage of it. He had his hands all over that one. Georgia, I reckon we're going to be talking a lot this season about the two Maxes set up, and with Myercheck being unavailable, we're clearly a key forward short at the moment, which probably makes it necessary to play both Gawn and Heath in the same side, and especially if the coaches are reluctant to throw JVR into the ruck for long stretches, and Kingy did in his presser acknowledge that himself. He finally we hear someone say he doesn't want JVR running up and down the field all day. He wants to keep him in the forward line so he can kick bags of five. So the big question becomes how do you best structure the two rucks when they're not actually in the middle? Where do you want Max spending his time when Heath is rucking, and vice versa? Is Gawn being used too deep in the forward? Would you rather see him roaming higher up the ground where he can influence play more? And I guess the $1 million question is he carrying a niggle from a couple of weeks ago? That's why they're being a bit cautious with him.
Yeah, I think that last point of yours is relevant. I think he's still carrying something. He certainly didn't have the same freedom of movement around the ground in this game. But just as equally, I don't think the coaching staff have actually worked out how to use both of them successfully yet. Yeah. I don't think that was the plan at the start of the season. I thought it was going to be Max Gawn for the majority and Max Heath for an occasional fill-in here and there and maybe. The reality, as I pointed out, is that everybody's using two rucks these days, everyone who's successful anyhow. And when we come up against Hawthorn, they've got Meek and Reeves who are their rucks. We'll certainly need two against them this week, two specialist rucks in their own right. It was interesting in the first quarter. They actually had both of them on a lot more of the time than what we're seeing. I think that this is part of this transition into finding out what's best. After that, it seemed to be one on, one off. With Max Heath, I think he only spent about 50% game time in total on the ground. The other question, I think, while Max has got good endurance, I don't know that Max Heath has yet. So you can't really run him as much as perhaps you would like to at this stage. He's only, for ruckman, he's still relatively young at 24. But I don't know that he's got certainly the equivalent amount of endurance that Max Gawn has. So it's a bit of this, a bit of that. We'll certainly with Max up forward, the very Max Gawn up forward, he stretches the defence absolutely. It was definitely a mark of his, but that's in the goal square, and but that's exactly what he does to the defence. He's such a threat when he goes in there. People look at it and go, well, it's a real loss because he's not further up the ground or not in the centre. Well, like I said, we've got to find that balance between the best use of these two ruckmen. So it'll be interesting what they do over the coming weeks and further on to the season. But I don't think we're going to go back to the one ruckman role that we've traditionally been witnessing.
Max he has a regular appearance on Triple M during the week, and so after the Sydney game, they sort of spoke to him about playing in the forward line, and he said an interesting thing. He said when he's plays up the ground, he's involved in say 20 contests up the line where he gets to try and take a mark. But when he's playing the forward line, he might only get 4 chances to have a mark, in that time. And so you've really, as a forward, you've got to make the most of every time the ball comes to you. But yeah, you certainly certainly don't get a look at the ball as much as you do when you're up the ground. But yeah, I think there's got to be something.
And in that case, you've got to get Max Heath to start doing the work up the ground.
Yeah.
But this is all about learnings for both players and staff.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
George, you've got Crossy wrong, but you've nailed Heath. And I still think Heath might go out, but you've been right with Heath from the get-go. And the fifth, as you said before the season started, having the fifth player and not having to worry about a sub does provide that opportunity, doesn't it? And it's the question that's coming up. I won't do it now, but the idea that there was a suggestion Petty was going to play forward this week probably speaks to how they would have ideally used Heath, George, which is off the bench, directly off the bench. And there's no doubt it gives the opportunity for someone else to get smashed in those contests other than Maxi, doesn't it? Like Heath can cop it all game and get physically smashed. What I've found a little bit interesting is they haven't played Heath up forward at all.
No.
Hardly at all. Maybe he was up there once for the game, this one, and I reckon at all in the previous one. I'm not sold on Maxi as a forward. And I like the idea of him stretching the opposition's defensive height. But although he is incredibly good below his knees, and when the ball hits the deck, for someone so tall, he's incredibly athletic. He did a turn on the boundary line, sort of on the opposite side to where I was sitting, but not far from me. And I was just amazed at his ability to sort of pivot and turn and all of that at his height. But and his kicking has been a bit better this year. But yeah, if they're going to play 2 rucks, for me, I like the idea of them playing Heath on the bench and coming on to give him, like it's the old-fashioned way, isn't it, with the second ruck, play and give him a chop out. Funnily enough, it seems a bit sort of heretical, but we lose a little bit from he's such a good tap work. He seems to have found a great relationship with Steele, Max Heath. Probably Gorm would hate to hear that, but it's probably a stretch to say we lose something when Heath goes off the ball. But it's what do you do with Heath when Maxi's in the ruck? Probably go to the bench, I guess. But it'll be interesting this week with 2 good rucks, not just sort of a good ruck and a part-timer with the Hawks.
Singer asks, what did you guys make of the role AMW was given after his late inclusion for the ill Disco Turner? Obviously, they're not like-for-like players, but AMW has played almost all of his footy in defence, and if he's going to cement a spot in the seniors, that's almost certainly where he'd be playing. And granted, Bowie returned this week and probably occupies the same role AMW would be competing for. But with the late call-up, Andy Beniz-Wakefield ended up playing just 34% game time and was thrown forward. Love that goal, though, he certainly did, and so did the rest of the team. Unfortunately, he might lose his temporary spot in the team so far. So how far off do you think he is, and where will he play? So, big man, what do you think? AMW will hold? Do you think he'll hold his spot in the team? Turner's likely to return this week. Bowie is definitely playing, and he's playing in that similar role. Rivers might be returning this week. Salem in the next couple of weeks. What does AMW's future look like, and where will we see him play?
In terms of the question about making of the sort of gone are the days where it's a straight swap for Disco Turner. He wasn't swapping.
I don't think they were saying that, but he came in and they didn't play him as a defender, which is his role. They played him as a forward,
But as Singer notes, obviously they're not for like. But I think the easier way to think of the forward line is in sevens. So to think of the back 7 and the forward 7, and increasingly there's fewer and fewer key position players. Increasingly, particularly under the way, which is really my point I was making before, around Kings playing, is that you've got this suite of utilities, essentially, mid-sized utilities, of which, if you think we need to run 300 kilometres, those utilities are going to run 150 of them, and then they're all got to do the kilometres. And so he could have used him in all sorts of different spots in the way that Cross was used against Sydney in all sorts of different spots. So where he plays his best footy, I totally agree with George. It's our biggest gap is that sort of ability of the small defender who can lock down the very, very best crumbing forwards like a Nick Watson. We've lacked that. So that's where I see him playing his best footy. But I would think, again, it's well worth having a listen, actually, the SEN interview this morning with King and Corns and David King and Corns interview him. And he talks about how much he values players who can play in multiple positions. And it was an interesting insight into his philosophy. So I think AMW would fit into that because he is a player. He's got a good tank. He can go forward, as we just saw, and play small forward. He can go back and play as a traditional, almost back pocket player who locks down a small player. Could probably play at half-back flank. I think he'll get dropped this week, I suspect. We'll talk about it later, but I think there'll just be the one change and it'll be him coming out. And I just go back in, basically. I love that goal too. I have to stop at the footy. I have to stop, almost have had to stop doing it, is standing up really quickly after something exciting because I almost faint every time from blood rushing to my head.
That's happened to me. I must admit, it's happened to me before.
One day at the MCG, I'm going to bloody faint and fall from the Olympic stand to some poor bugger directly below me. So I want to try and avoid doing that. And the only time I did that in this match, the only time I felt so moved to stand up and scream was when he kicked that goal. I was so thrilled for him. I don't know where you boys were sitting, but I just was so, so happy for him. And like they've talked a lot. You hear a lot of the players. You hear it so often that it's real. That thing when people start repeating the same sorts of mantras and just about the happiness and how people were connected. His teammates were so evidently happy for him. And it wasn't his first goal in footy. It was his first goal after, 640 odd days without having played a game of footy. He was thrilled. The players were thrilled. I was thrilled. And it was a bloody good goal too, I have to say. It was a nice snap. It's worth remembering, George, you might remember, or Andy, I think he was a small forward when he came into the footy, wasn't he? Wasn't he a small forward before he went back to half-back flank at Casey, or am I making that up?
It rings a bell, but yeah.
Maybe someone in the chat room. The chat room, I just tested it. The chat room is working. If you are listening live and can recall whether Andy Menez Wakefield was a junior, small forward when he first got drafted, there'll be a prize.
That was his first.
Andy will send
was that his first goal in footy? Yeah, I think it was. No, it is in AFL. Oh no, he did kick one. Sorry, he kicked one against. That is his only goal. He's only played. This was his 7th game.
Well, no wonder he got kicked back to the back line. It was his first goal in AFL football. It's his 7th game, right? Maybe that was what it was about as well. I didn't realise that. I just didn't even.
But I think there was a bit of his comeback from a knee injury in that as well, for sure. Absolutely. All right, let's get on to the next one. Rue Beauty writes, thought Petty had his best game of the year. Interesting to hear he trained with the forwards all week and was going to replace Checkers until Disco was a late withdrawal. Now, I was a bit out of the loop this week, so I wasn't paying attention to the training threads this week, so I'm assuming that it was discussed in one of those threads about Petty spending time training with the forwards, and if accurate, Disco Turner's illness and subsequent late withdrawal probably threw a real curveball at the coaching staff, if that was what their plan was. And I actually thought Petty played a really strong first half. He was reading the ball superbly, he was intercepting confidently. He seemed to mark just about everything that sort of came his way. I thought Waterman then worked his way into the game more after half time and probably got the better of that matchup. I'm not sure if he was on him the whole time, the way the defence is done, but overall I thought Petty showed a bit this week. But George, what did you make of Petty's game? And if Disco's available again this week, do you think we might see the swingman being swung forward once again, and maybe it might work this time?
I would hope not. Moving him forward was been trying Petty forward long enough to know that he's not a very good kick for goal. Is the primary reason. I find it very hard to believe that he was training as a forward during the week. We've still got Jeffo and JVR there, so the decision to play both of those players wouldn't have been any reason to put Petty up forward. Petty was the ideal match for Waterman, who's a big, solid unit and depends on his strength. So, I don't think there'll be any change there. I think it was a good move of his to get a new haircut this week, or get rid of the hair in total.
Yeah, I think
just give up the fight.
We don't want to bald shame anyone, but yeah, sometimes
we don't, Andy.
Yeah, look, he did exactly what he needed to do against a very strong opponent. Waterman's, you're not going to stop him totally, and that was the case in this particular game. He got a couple of goals. Well, good luck to him. But the defence held up pretty well overall. Every week that goes by, if we're talking about defence, I'm more and more impressed with Howes.
He's fantastic.
He's rapidly becoming that player who, like Lever was in his, in the past, absolutely reads the ball and knows where to be exactly the right time.
He's the most improved player, I think, this year so far. And with 9 games in of our
he goes about it too. I agree with how well he reads it, but he's one of those players that sort of flies under the radar almost by definition in a way. Yeah. Just goes about his business, gets it done, plays tall, plays small. He took a beautiful intercept mark not far. It was really quite close to me, and
doesn't panic either.
Doesn't panic. Yeah, he's not flashy with his kicking, but makes good decisions, hits targets.
Yep.
He's one of the reasons I worry about Riv, to be honest, because I feel like Riv isn't quick enough to play out of the middle, and he's also not quick enough to. He's not a fantastic kick, so I can't see him going to the middle. In which case, he's halfback flank, and Howes. They play a similar role. Play tall a little bit, can play small. But I agree, George. He's makes really good decisions. This was not a terrible defensive performance from us in many respects. Our percentages, our opposition score is ticked under 100 now, so it's 98.7 or something. So it would have looked a bit different if Waterman kicked straight for Petty, though.
Yeah, it's not too far.
Really, a lot of them you can't blame the defender when when we don't put pressure on up the ground, particularly in that last quarter. We'd stopped putting much sort of focus on the kicker, and Waterman annoys me, but I've always liked him as a footballer. Like, he annoys me. He was throwing his head back like crazy, and
there was one free kick he got. He absolutely milked it, and that was not a free kick. I'm sorry.
We didn't get much noise of affirmation free kicks, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. I think we were behind in the freeze this week, and some of them there's no way. Some of the I don't never like the ones that we don't get. It's those that kill you, but some of those that you don't get would not have not been a free kick in Perth because that noise of affirmation.
Just on Petty, I feel like there's at least as if Demonland's representative of Demons fans. It feels like to me he's become a bit of a whipping boy.
He has, I don't know, absolutely.
Is that your feel for? Yeah, and unfairly, I reckon.
I think it's the problem is always defenders look bad because oppositions kick goals against them. And forwards are fantastic. Somebody will kick 1 goal every 3 games, and Demonlanders unfortunately think that they're fantastic players, but the defenders are on a hiding to nothing always.
Particularly the key defenders, because when you get chopped up, they're the only one who's actually accountable for a man. The rest are all floating about in the zone that we were talking last week. When the zones don't work, everyone's success and orphans and
when the ball's coming in because the midfield's utter crap. The poor defenders are the ones who pay for it.
Well, let's get on to Casey, who suffered one of their worst losses in years, smashed by Carlton VFL side by 122 points after a competitive first half completely unravelled. The young Demons were overwhelmed by Carlton's size, experience and pressure, with the Blues piling on 10 final quarter goals. Riley Bonner battled hard with 30 disposals. Trent Rivers impressed in his return from injury, and Tom McDonald worked tirelessly in defence, but Casey were ultimately outclassed across the ground in a performance the club will want to move on from quickly. And George, I'm not sure how much we dwell on a 122-point drubbing to a side whose senior team has only won one game. Perhaps just talk about the performances of any of the players who are likely to get a call up, or that you've got any of our senior list of players, I guess.
Yeah, not much to commend about this particular game. Carlton actually kicked 22 goals to our 1 at one point during the period of the game. 22 goals to 1, starting in the first quarter.
We only kicked 3 in total.
In total, yeah, exactly. The team was, because of the differentials in the number of AFL listed players we had versus what they had, was really stark. There are a whole stack of players at Casey that are barely VFL levels because they're bringing up players from here, there and everywhere else to try and fill the holes, and they're not very skilled. The interesting things that stood out for me was if you're looking at statistics, don't look at the backline statistics. Everybody in the backline had about 20 plus possessions this week. That's because the ball was going down there so often that if you didn't get 20 possessions, you weren't doing anywhere near your job. So it wasn't surprising that Rivers, T-Mac, Bonner, the list goes on and on of players with heaps and heaps of possessions, but the trouble was they let it through 37 times as well. Things to keep an eye on. Kenfield had very few opportunities, relatively speaking. He wasn't kicking straight, and I suspect he's still carrying that knee. He's got a very heavy strapping on his knee, which is problematic for when we talk about the next coming game. Also, Xavier Taylor had a knee bandage on in this particular game, and might go some of the way towards explaining how he's not quite involved in the game as what he normally or should be, that we saw pre-season in particular. So there wasn't much to take from the game. Tom Matthews was finally put into the centre in the last quarter to give him a chance to do something because the ball simply didn't finish up in the Casey forward line. It was really disappointing from a coaching point of view that they basically left Kalani White in the ruck all day. He was absolutely monstered by the Carlton ruck. And I don't think, people say, oh, you would have learned something out of that. Well, I don't think he would have learned a single thing out of that. He was, just beaten around all day because he's not physically, hasn't got the strength of some of these AFL level players. So I thought the coach could have put even Tyrone Amu into the ruck just because he's a bigger, harder player. But, it was disappointing all round, and to lose by that much wasn't particularly unexpected.
Ben, you
just wanted to make one comment about that game. I was pretty disappointed with Xavier Taylor's body language. Again, I have to say I don't want to bit down on Xavier Taylor, but he just similar body language and energy that I talked about after seeing him live when Casey played Footscray, and and I'm hoping it's just immaturity. Young player, takes time, and that's what I'm expecting it is. But nonetheless, not a great. I put a lot of stock in body language, and I put a lot of stock in things like players who get dropped. Still playing. Still showing the right energy and the right approach, and going even harder at it. If he wants to force his way back into this side, at the moment 6-3, he's going to have to make sure he leaves no stone unturned and is 100% sort of ferocious. And at the Casey level, it's his only way back. So, yeah, I don't know about you, George. I watched the first 3 quarters and I couldn't watch anymore. So your feeling about his performance?
Like I said, I'm putting it down at this stage. If he's carrying a knee bandage, then he may not carrying a knee injury of some sort, then he won't be able to push himself as hard as he wants. And I can certainly understand young players getting down if they've got the ability but can't actually execute because of their limitations that they've got. But it's really hard to judge. He's certainly not producing what I saw in the pre-season games in particular. I thought he was going to be a lock for round 1. Andy, your
Well,
thought?
I'm really disappointed because I haven't seen a lot of him at Casey in the past 2 weeks, but I've heard what you guys have said about him in the past 2 weeks, and it's almost the complete opposite to what we saw in the preseason at training. And the enthusiasm and his just hunger and just wanting to impress. And I thought this guy's going to play round one. Obviously, we're realistic.
Which was all the draft
which
talk
we know
as well.
they take time sometimes, so I'm prepared to wait. But I don't like what I've heard. I haven't seen it myself personally, but I don't like that. It seems like the attitude has dropped a little bit. So I don't know if that's just a personal thing that he's salty about not playing, or I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Look, I might be being unfair. It's just let's say it's a watch at this moment.
Yes.
But it's I just compare it and contrast it to how George and I described Bowser's performance in his first game back after injury. It was like chalk and cheese. Like, you're so evident that Bowser wanted the footy, wanted to play at his very best. It didn't seem to matter to him that he was playing at VFL level. And similar with Tommy Mack. I mean, Tommy Mack, his effort's still there. I watched that game and thought, well, he'll come in when needed, but he's not in our best 23 time, which really pains me to say because he's one of my all-time favourite Demons. But you watch Tommy Mack play at Casey and he looks like he's putting in exactly the same effort that he does at seniors level. And for me, I put a lot of stock.
And he will until the day he stops playing, which will be at the end of the year.
Till his day,
And that's why
I respect that. But he's a kid, so plenty of time to grow out of that. And Colt's a really good, example of that. Colt had his body language was iffy at times in the seniors.
Well, I was thinking that if this year was the same, he'd be gone at the end of this year. It's not the way he's playing, or his attitude now is complete. Maybe the new coach was the lease on life that he needed. So, let's get into
Before we go on, Andy. In the live chat room, Gary Baker has said that Andy Manise Wakefield, in fact, was a junior. It was a midfielder / small forward as a junior, and his draft report reads his snapshot: a lively ball winner with clean hands and crafty evasive skills, who can also make an impact around goal.
Yeah, a lot of the times coaches love turning forwards or that into defenders, and they need a defender in a team, and then you show that you're good in that position, you get stuck in that position. It happened to me one year in junior, so I was forward and thrown into the back pocket because I played one
his goal, and his goal would have been no surprise to his junior coaches, I'd be guessing.
Yeah. Let's get into the preview. The Demons return to the MCG this week to take on the high-flying Hawks, or Hawthorn are widely touted to be one of the contenders for the flag this season. Yet if the Demons can overcome the odds and defeat the Hawks, they will leapfrog them on the ladder and take yet another scalp for their trophy room. It's a big man, followed by George. Your thoughts on this matchup?
Fascinating game, really fascinating game. There's two styles emerging in footy. Everyone's wanting to – the best teams are moving the ball really well from the back half. The best teams also punish on turnover and score on turnover. But there's a really interesting tactical evolution or division that's splitting between the top teams, and I include us in those top teams for the sake of this argument, at least, between kicking long tool contests and using high disposal. So basically, low disposal versus high disposal. Freo are number one in the AFL for kicking long down the line. I don't know where we are exactly because they typical of the way they do the reporting on this information on things like first crack. They had the top three and then not the next. No, they didn't have the top. But Melbourne must be up in the top 3 or 4 because we're number one for scoring from kicks long down the line and number one from retention from kicks long down the line. So we've got that territory first, low disposal, goes straight towards the opposition, towards our goal approach. Hawthorn, that's one type of where with Freo, Collingwood is similar, Geelong is similar. Hawthorn, on the other hand, are a high disposal side who look to stretch the width of the ground. They're number 2, evidencing that. They're number 2 for kicks per game. They're number 3 in the AFL for disposals per game. They're number 4 for marks per game. Interestingly, they're also number 1 for hit-outs per game. They're also third in the AFL for uncontested possessions per game. So very much like Freo used to play, where they'd keep keepings off, essentially. They combine that with being a brilliant kicking team. They're first in effective disposals per game, fantastic kicking side. They're also, they're a much better side than I'd hope they would be. I have to be perfectly honest. They're my least favourite team. They're number 2 in contested marks per game, 3 in stoppages, which probably speaks to George's point about having 2 quality rucks. They're second in score involvements per game. They also play, I think, their coaching style is a bit similar to King in the sense Mitchell's coaching style is a bit similar in the sense that they will adjust their tactics for their opponent. Unlike, say, Melbourne did in 21-20-23, which was, here's the way we play, everyone else respond to that. So Mitchell is quite a tactical coach. King is quite a tactical coach. So I find that really fascinating combination. I mentioned last week in the stat file preview and also in the preview for the Swans game, Swans had us bested in every single statistical area that matters. That's not quite true in this game. The Hawks have us certainly matched in some, but some of the areas where I think will be critical for us to win this game, we're scoring more points from turnover than them. We're 49.7 points a game from turnover we're scoring, and it's defending. We defend turnover, I should say, slightly better than them. We're giving up 49.7 from turnover. They're giving up 49.9 points per game on turnover. So for us to win this game, we've got to, I think it'll come down to how we win the turnover battle. They're really, really good at defending stoppages. So we're giving up 43.2 points from stoppages. They're only giving up 32.8 from stoppages. That is unbelievably impressive. And it really speaks to their balance between they've got an excellent defensive system, really good defenders. It's massive that Barrass is out. It's huge that Barrass is out. It looks like Gunston's not going to play too. Barrass is really critical.
I don't think he may still play Gunston. Gunston, I think. Yeah, Barrass is out. Connor Nash is out, I think.
It's a heel. It's like a foot issue of some sort. So I can't imagine they
didn't train today or trained away from the group or whatever. But yeah, it's sort of 50-50 at the moment. But anyway, it's huge if he doesn't play.
He's an outcome, really.
He kicks 7
when he plays well, it's because of how well they move the ball and they get it out the back. It's less about Gunston, more of course he takes his chances, but Barrass is massive for them. Points from stoppages is one of the areas we do. We're averaging 40.9 points from stoppages. They're only averaging 32.6. So they're the 2 areas for me that we need to get on top, which is points from stoppages and win the turnover battle. They have us in a whole bunch of other areas. They're only giving up 85.8 points a game. We're 97.3. So they've got a pretty stingy defence. They defend their stoppages well. In attacking, we're averaging 101.1. They're averaging 100. So we're putting on bigger scores than them, which is impressive. We're scoring 54.2. And again, this is sort of the point I think where it'll come down to. We're scoring 54.2 points from turnover. They're scoring 64.2 from turnover. So if we can't stop them scoring on turnover, we're not going to win this game of footy. But we do, as I mentioned before, we're smashing them for points from stoppage, 40.9 per game to their 32.6. So fascinating game of footy. It's huge that Barrass is out. Let's hope that Gunston's out as well. Be a huge game. King was pumping up the importance of the crowd getting along. 4:15, which is a funny time. I've always found those twilight games a bit weird. So, but I don't know what sort of crowd you boys thinking.
I think it'll be decent-ish. You'd think Melbourne supporters are going to get along, and if they don't, we're in a bit of trouble membership-wise. If we can't, the way we've been playing,
the trouble is it's a Melbourne home game, so Hawthorn don't turn up.
Do they not turn up, even in a year they're playing well?
Although they've been winning.
Yeah, they're theatre goers.
Notorious, they are. Yeah.
They're a bunch of theatre goers. One of the things about the Hawks is that I really like, grudgingly, is they're a really fierce contested ball side. So they're averaging, in differentials, they're averaging plus 13.4 contested possessions than their opponents. We're minus 1 in our differential. So they're physically, and they're beating us. They're averaging plus 2.7 over their opponent's differential clearances. We're just 0.1. So the contested work is really impressive. That combination of their contested work and that's really their kicking skill too. Is hopefully we'll get up in their grill and really disrupt their ability to hit those targets. That it's really critical to the way they play. They play like a version. Feels to me, if I was to sort of find an analogy, it's like some parts of the Brisbane game combined with some parts of the Swans game. They're a pretty well balanced side, I have to say.
Yeah, like the Swans game, where it was shut Blakey down and shut Warner down. In this case, I think it's going to be shut Amon down, shut Impey down, shut McKenzie down, shut Moore down, because those are the ones that are with high skill, high kicking ability. They move they make good decisions. They move the ball so quickly. That's why all their uncontested numbers are up, because they kick the ball to their fellow players and they move the ball so quickly and accurately. That's the real danger. So it's going to come down to our half forwards' ability to stop them doing that. And that's why Gunston's getting the opportunities up forward. They move it so quickly into the spare space. They leave him in the open. They don't have a great, apart from Gunston and Watson. Like Gunston kicked 7 this week and Watson 3. You take 10 goals out of any side, but you've got to be able to stop Watson, and you've got to be able to stop Ginnivan. Those problematic small forwards who are very highly skilled. So it will be a great thing. No Barras is a big positive, but they've still got Sicily and Battle down there, who finally cracked against Fremantle last week. But it'll be a fair ask for JVR and Jeffo if he's in the side this week. To beat those regardless. So, it's going to be a pretty tough game by any measure, and be a real contrast for us.
And I reckon, George, it's an interesting point about Freo. That was a great game of footy. They dismantled them in the last quarter, and a big part of that was how fast they were moving the ball from the halfback flank. Hawthorn had no answer. They look a very Mitchell, like maybe Scott is the other example too. He's a bit of a chess player, and once they got going, once Freo really started moving the ball quickly, and that was, to be fair to Hawthorn, that was late in the last quarter. I was very attentive that game because I had bet on the Freo to make their line, and they were well behind it halfway through that last quarter. But once they got rolling, Hawthorn could not stop their movement from the back half. And I'm hoping that's what we'll try to do to them, is to really exploit that and play in a similar way that they did. Defensively, Hawthorn have got a really good system, so they make that difficult. But once they did find it difficult to slow them down, once they got a roll on. What's the weather like, Andy?
It's a 4:00 game, and it's 0 to 2 millimetres. Sunday's meant to be 1 to 10 mil, so the rain's got to come late, if it comes at all, which it could in this game.
I don't necessarily trust the weather apps. The weather apps, it's saying 0 millimetres the entire day. But
22 degrees, mostly cloudy, breeze in the afternoon.
But yes.
Oh, it says here Melbourne will win. That's a weird thing to be on the forecast.
But it's got, for Sunday, it's got rain, but it says the precipitation starts at like 1 p.m. So anyway, we'll see.
We'll wait and see. Could be a good day for footy on a Saturday, even if it's 4:15.
I don't mind a 4:15 on a Saturday. Finishers get home in time for tea. It's fine.
I like 1:15. They should.
That was actually all right. I didn't mind that.
Yeah, don't want to be stuck in Docklands after dark.
No.
Better East Melbourne for get stuck in East Melbourne. That's a much more classier place to get stuck in.
Ins and outs.
Yeah, well, Disco Donut, unless there's something more sinister, and we could have a mystery injury of the week. We've had many a player either pull out or be managed only for then the next week there's all of a sudden an injury, because wasn't Lindsay originally was managed and then all of a sudden haven't seen him since then.
Still another 2 to 3 weeks with him.
Yeah, so hopefully Disco Turner's just an actual illness and he'll be back.
But then there were a report of an injury to Windsor as well, a foot injury, toe injury.
Well, that's not good because he's got that history
which
of foot.
I think took him out of this game for a good portion of it. So that'll be an interesting one.
So if he's out, I think that means Rivers does come in.
Yeah.
So who do you think will come in, go out, George?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a case of almost who's the fittest this week. Jeffo's performance wasn't anything to write home about this week with 3 touches in total in a game of footy. But then I look at Kentfield's knee, and I don't know that he'll be able to last a full game of football. I don't know that Rivers would come in. Disco would be the logical one to come back in. But,
he'll come in.
But I can't see necessarily Rivers coming back in. Who's he going to replace unless it's going into the midfield to replace a Windsor? I think it's going to come down to who's available, who's in the best physical state this week more than anything else.
Yeah, as I said, I reckon one change. Andy Menez, Wakefield comes out, Disco comes in, and a watch on Jeffo. I think Jeffo keeps his spot at 3 possessions is not huge, but watching him up close, he competes hard. He was really competing hard. He brought the ball to ground a number of times. A couple of times we kicked to him where it was a 2-on-1, and he fought, scrapped, and brought the ball to ground. And that's obviously his role. But the other one was. It was fantastic. I was surprised he only had 3 disposals because I thought he actually played pretty well watching live. But the lead-up mark that he did, I forget who kicked it. Might have been Chin, actually.
Chin. Chin shoved it down his guts, basically.
It was a good mark, though. Geez, he was running at pace. The guy was right on him. He's got good jukes when he can stick him. He wants to probably be involved a bit more. But I don't know, for 3 disposal games, I was just surprised he had that few, but I thought he competed super well, and that's what obviously Kings. That's the first thing.
My concern about him even in this game was he just gets lost in between. If the ball's shoved down his throat or he's got to compete in a marking contest, that's fine. But at other times he's just wandering around, not knowing where to go, what to do. I don't think there's been any change in that.
I think he'll get another week at least to show he deserves his spot, and hopefully it's a slow burn with him yet. So what about you, Andy? What do you reckon? Who's that?
Turner's definitely in, probably Moniz Wakefield just as a live, last in, first out type of situation. I didn't see Rivers in the 2s, so I don't know what his fitness level is. But again, who comes out? So unless it's Windsor is injured, that's for me. And that's where I think we're going to leave it for tonight. Look out for Big Man's Stats Files preview podcast. They'll drop on Friday. If you enjoy that deeper dive into the stats in the lead up to the Hawks game. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. That was a thank you to D's Faithful 87. Thank you to a Rostar who sent in a voicemail last week, and we played it this week. So thank you for that. And as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to the Pearl, Pingu, Pates, Smurf, Master Chief, Lefty, Red and Bluebeard, Singer, and Rue Beauty. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and Big Man. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it out and give you a shout out on the next show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. Well, it's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot? Keep your eye on the red and the blue. Well, the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick. And you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue to sing this song to you. Should old acquaintance be forgotten?